Welcome to episode 46. I thought the best way to start this one was with an explanation of why the cabin will end up looking like this. I like it the way it is, and I hope you do too. It starts with the level of the floor, mostly the cockpit sole. I made it as low as possible so that we'd have maximum headroom and the lowest cabin profile. I just hate boats with big boxy cabins. Now, given the height of the sole is fixed, the overall height of the aft cabin can now be set. The height of the forward cabin also needs to be worked out. I made the forward sole as low as possible, but with a boat like this, there was never going to be stand-up headroom in the forward cabin. The magical height is enough headroom for when you sit on the loo. If you hark back to episode 44, you'll remember the support for the toilet bowl needed to be high enough to fit the through-hull valves underneath, and that governed the height of the beams at the end of the forward cabin once someone was sitting on the loo. I guess if someone taller than me wants to use the loo, they'll have to bow their head down a little bit. This explains why you saw the cabin side mock-up 2 episodes ago. In fact, the whole cabin side mock-up was done at that time and put aside where other things were finished. In this drawing, the 2 box sections near the midships are the fuel and water tank box, and to the rear is the engine box cum dining table. Yes, that headroom is a bit low. I've actually moved the top of the deck beam up to the top line that's drawn on that piece of plywood, so now I've got about an inch or so above my head before it hits the deck beam. Well, finally I can show you what the cabin's going to look like. So there's a mock-up of it behind me in lightweight plywood. And what I've done is I've got my ancient old laptop computer. I don't know if you're able to see that at all. I'll try and do it down here so that, yeah, I don't know. I've printed off a print of the drawing. So all these vertical lines there are a little grid so that I could take measurements to draw that curve and the curved window on the cabin side. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. If you've never used a bending batten, here is a tip. The yellow tongue from pine board flooring makes a good bending batten, and you can either drill holes in it and use nails, or it can be clamped as I've done here. I had to use clamps because I've used the batten on edge because of the deepness of the curve, but if the curve is shallow enough, it's better to use the batten flat and sometimes use nails if you can't find enough room for clamps. Once you've clamped the batten to near the shape you want, release and reclamp every second clamp, and then go back and do the same with the remaining clamps or nails if that's what you use. You will see the batten will adjust the shape a little bit each time you do this. Keep at it until you like the look of the curve. Lecture finished. It's always fun trying to wrangle a 4mm thick pattern as big as this on your own. It often, as you can see now, doesn't work very well. But luckily I was able to put the staples back into the holes they came out of so that everything lined up again perfectly. So I was able to continue making the pattern without too much drama. I already knew the shear lines at each side varied a little bit, but it wasn't enough to be visually apparent, so I left them as they were. The cabin sides, however, need to fit each carlin properly, otherwise it wouldn't look good. At the starboard side, I marked a line at deck level on the pattern, and then moved the pattern to the port side and marked the deck line on that side of the pattern. This gives me two cabin sides that will appear to be the same and will fit the shape of the carlins on each side, the only difference being small variations in the shape of the shear line at deck level. With the deck line marked on both sides, the cabin can now be marked and cut. As happens, there was no video on the day, so the first cabin side is already marked as we continue. I needed to add to the length of the ply for the cabin side, so I scarfed on about 500mm for this. You've already seen the scarf cutting jig in earlier episodes, so I've gone straight to gluing here. In fitting these side windows, I decided to route the recess on the inside of the cabin side and trust to Sikaflex to keep the water out. This means I won't have to have any battens or other framework on the outside of the windows, as I've always seen that to be an invitation for dry rot to start.
won't if the ends right. You'll just needs a that's touching there. Maybe I'll take it off. Make it nice. It's looking smaller in here. Yes, I suppose. It's certainly looking smaller. Yeah. Yeah. Plenty. But occasionally, I mean, this is a nice layer. Actually, bring that in. It's not going to go over. That's one of the best things. And that should make it safe from yeah, what a tiny little
I'm about to start drilling the countersink holes for the screws holding the cabin sides on, so they'll look neater with wooden plugs. Before that, I'll explain the steps at the rear end of the cabin side. The combing around the back of the cockpit is curved as it was originally on this boat, so I'm staying with that detail. To make this possible, I'm using 4mm laminations of what is called bendy ply. This will have most of the grain running across the sheet, so it bends very easily, as you'll see later. The outer lamination will butt up against the end of the cabin side, and each further lamination will take up each step to form a strong joint. Once the cabin side was in the correct position, I screwed blocks to the outside, level with the deck, so the cabin side could be removed to apply glue and then refitted without any variation in position. Now the cabin sides are permanently in place, I can fit the rear cockpit combing. The first piece had to be very carefully fitted, as the general shape was then to be copied to the other 3 laminations before gluing them all on in one operation. The height of the combing follows the camber of the deck across the boat, and then it transitions to the shape of the shear line as it goes forward on each side. On the lower side, the combing is 25mm lower than the beam, as well as the carlin, and this is the same along the length of the cabin sides. This allows for easy fixing of any parts of the internal fit out. When marking these pieces, I left them all at the full length until the gluing and laminating process was underway. Once positioned and temporarily clamped, I marked and fitted each end and then finished applying the glue. This was the only way to ensure a good fit at the end of each lamination. Again, I forgot to turn the camera on at this part, so hey presto, here it is, all glued up with just a few more clamps to add. Well, I think that's enough for this episode. We've got a lot done, and it's quite a long one. So I'll put the deck beams in next on the forward cabin and set up the hatch area. So I look forward to doing that. So thanks for watching. See you next time.